Greetings YouTube, LMS Tactical here. I want to talk to you a little bit about revolvers. As you can see, I have a revolver sitting in front of me. That's probably because we're going to talk a little bit about revolvers. So first things first, show you that the weapon is indeed empty. I don't know if you can see that, just trust me. There you go, how about that? Can you see that? Where's the frickin' hole? It's like my first date, I always ask the same question. Okay, you can see that there's no rounds in the cylinder. Okay, so this revolver is actually kind of special to me. It's a 4-inch stainless steel Smith & Wesson. And the reason it's special is this was my first LAPD issued revolver. I mean, when you think back on it, back during the early 80s, you know, in the mid 80s too, you know, I don't think we didn't go to the 9mm until, I don't know, like 1987, I guess. But we were disarming on a nightly basis, taking down gangbangers with Tech 9s, AK-47s, Uzis. Those were all the weapons of the day. And you take them, you literally run across them every night. And this is what we were using. Yeah, so that's a whole nother story. But I want to talk to you about revolvers. Just, you know, if you're new to weapons or new to firearms and you're thinking about getting a revolver, or you're familiar with weapons and you're thinking about carrying a revolver, if you're an expert on revolvers and you just like watching videos on people with revolvers, if you just can't say the word revolver enough, let's talk about a few things that perhaps the new person may not know and the familiar person may have forgotten. Okay, so what are the pros and cons to carrying a revolver, first of all? And we're going to go over some things in a second here. We're going to go over some trigger control and just some things that you can apply to all firearms, but I wanted to do a revolver thing anyways. So, pros and cons of a revolver. I think the biggest con, we'll start with those first, is that you're limited in terms of capacity. I mean, let's face it, in this case, in most cases, you've got 6 rounds in the cylinder. If you go for the smaller ones, like I have a 5-shot that I used to carry as a backup, and that's a stainless steel Smith & Wesson. That's also a 5-shot. Here comes Charlie. He's doing good. That's my dog for you new people. And you know, I think the judge too. Yeah, the Taurus judge. I think that's only 5 shots. Hi, Charlie. Daddy's making a YouTube video. But yeah, just go ahead and lay down. Got Charlie here in my mouth. Charlie! Good boy. Alright, so, and I got to give a disclaimer. Now, I've been accused by a couple people that I go off on tangents, and I assume that the people that are sticking with the channel realize that that's just what you get for the buck. You know, that's just how I talk, so sorry if I get sidetracked. I'm a talker. I'm a talker. Charlie, stop. I got a lot of distractions. I got this friggin' golden retriever here. Charlie, stop it. So, oh, you fuck, he pushed on my nipple, and I liked it. Charlie, don't be kinky in front of people. All right, so, you know, you're going to get people that are going to, you know, and these are well-meaning people, but they're going to have different opinions, like everything, like politics or anything else. And the people that love revolvers are going to love them, and those that hate them are going to hate them. And I'm one of these guys that, look, man, whatever works for you, that's the right thing. And I personally find an application for revolvers in my life. Maybe not so much as I do with the semi-automatics, but revolvers, they serve a great purpose, and they're tried and true. I mean, come on, this country was founded really pretty much behind or expanded behind the concept of the revolver. You got capacity issues. Okay, certainly you have a lot more ammunition capacity with the semi-automatics, with the 15-round magazines and blah, blah, blah. But there is a reliability concern that makes the revolver attractive. And where I think that comes into play with some of the new people, people that are new to firearms, excuse me, is maintenance. While I highly recommend that you perform the proper maintenance on your weapons, I will say that the revolver is a hell of a lot more forgiving. And what that means is, you know, I use this as an analogy. This is not meant to be accurate, but to illustrate the point, you could leave a semi-automatic in a sock drawer for a year and a revolver in a drawer for 5 years, not touch them. Now, when you pull that semi out, there's a good chance it's going to malfunction because of dust bunnies and other shit that's gotten inside the, you know, the oil's dried out and blah, blah, blah. But a revolver is almost guaranteed to work. I mean, as long as it's not rusted to where the cylinder won't index, you're good to go for the most part. And as long as the ammunition is still good. Now, I know there's somebody who's going to dispute me. Already stopped. But that's just the way it is. You either believe it or not. So revolvers tend to be a lot more forgiving, in my opinion, meaning that they're more reliable. If some people, let's just be honest, some people just despise cleaning weapons and maintaining weapons. It's not fun. It is a hassle, and while it's extremely important, and I don't have a lot of respect for those that don't do it, the reality is humans are humans, and if you're going to carry, especially these really small caliber, 32 caliber whatevers, the little semi-automatics, you know, those things, the smaller you get, the more chance of a malfunction under the best conditions. But you start adding dust or failure to lubricate or properly maintain, and you're setting yourself up for disaster, because Murphy's Law mandates that the weapon will fire until you need it, and then it won't fire. So, that being said, let's talk about another, in no particular order. I've had people ask me, why, when I load the revolver, why do I do this? And why do we see this on the old? And I'm going to flag you because you're not really there. You're on the fucking cell phone. So why do people do this? Now, I'm sure most of you know, but just in case some of you don't, it's not, contrary to what you might think, it's not to look cool, although it does look cool. It's like a little fidget spinner for men. There's a reason behind it, and that is when you load your 6 rounds into your revolver, or your 5 rounds or whatever, there's a possibility of the primer not being seated properly during the manufacture of the round. That is something that does happen, and it's called a high primer. That means the primer is not sitting down flush where it's supposed to be. It's raised a little bit, and if that happens and you go to shoot your weapon, you go to fire it, you know, each time you pull the trigger, the cylinder indexes 1 turn. Well, if there's a high primer, it's going to get caught up, and it's not going to index no matter how hard you pull the trigger. Because remember, we talked about when I did the video on weapon takeaways, and we talked about revolvers. Remember, it doesn't take much to stop. I mean, a child could hold the cylinder and stop a grown man from pulling the trigger. So a high primer, any obstruction, potentially could stop this thing from indexing. So you always get in the habit of, every time you load those rounds, you index the cylinder a few times. Make sure that everything's working the way it's supposed to be. Okay, the other thing is, and now chances are if you have a revolver, when you cock it back, it's going to stay cocked. The hammer will stay in the cocked position. This one doesn't. Why is that? That's because it was an LAPD issued firearm, and they had a policy that the weapons that they issued were what we called neutered, which meant that they were altered in such a way that the hammer could not stay locked back. The reason they did that was because, as you may or may not know, if you haven't shot a revolver, revolvers are double action. Well, this one is, not all of them. Double action means that when I pull this trigger, I'm doing 2 things. The first is I'm cocking it. You can see the hammer go back. And the second is I'm firing it. That's double action. If I cock it first, like you used to see the cowboys do in the Western movies, that's in single action mode. And look at the trigger. Watch how the trigger goes back when it's cocked. If it was cocked, look how far back it is. So it doesn't take more than just a butterfly to land on it to go ahead and drop the hammer. And so the LAPD's philosophy, and it was probably a good one, is that if guys got in the habit of cocking their weapons while they had somebody at gunpoint, there's a really increased chance of having an accidental discharge and, you know, a disaster, somebody getting shot that didn't need to be. Okay, so just a couple of things about the trigger, the grip and the trigger press. I like to, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see this clearly, but I like to have, and I've covered this on another video, but I like to have my right, because I shoot right-handed, my right thumb over my left thumb, and it's really hard because I'm behind my phone here, and it's leaning against the bottle on the table, so it's a little bit awkward. But The idea is you want to have a firm grip. If your grip is not tight, remember your grip is going to be a large part of whether or not you hit your target. If your grip's too loose, what's going to happen is you're going to if you limp wrist it and you have a semi-automatic, the recoil will not it'll basically, there won't be sufficient enough rigidity in your grip to allow the slide to function properly, and that'll result in a malfunction. So you'll end up with a double feed or something else. When it comes to a revolver, if you have a limp wrist, you're basically going to be off target. And that's where I want to go to next, is I want to talk about trigger positioning. So basically, you've got, this is the pad. This right here is the pad of your trigger finger. The first pad is going to be to the left of this crease. The second one will be to the right of it. And the reason that's important is you want to have about the middle of the first pad on the trigger. If you have too much finger on the trigger, what that results in, if you're shooting right-handed, is you're going to pull the weapon to the right, and your shots will be about 2 o'clock if you're aiming at the center of the target. If you're left-handed, it's going to be the same thing. It'll be at about, I don't know, 10 or 11 o'clock if you shoot it left-handed and you have too much finger. So you don't want to have too much finger. By the same token, you don't want to have too little finger, or it has the opposite effect. Okay? So you want to have about center of the first pad. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the trigger press. You want to make sure that once you go ahead and start to pull the trigger, you pull it nice and consistent and you follow through. Okay? You don't want to see the weapon jerking when you pull the trigger. When I'm training my students, I'll put a quarter on the barrel of the weapon, and if it falls off, they're jerking it too much. Okay? You want to have it with as little movement as possible. And the way that happens is you don't anticipate. If you anticipate, that's the other thing, is a lot of times new shooters are really, this is something that's common with new shooters, is, as they start to pull the trigger, they know there's going to be a loud boom, and so they kind of push the weapon forward, and of course you're going to be off target. So each shot should come as a total surprise. Boom. You should not be flinching or anticipating it. It should be a total surprise. And the other thing is, you don't want to push the weapon down. Some people subconsciously will try to help the bullet go down range. And look at the front of the barrel there. It goes down when I push. They see old cowboy movies where guys shoot like that, and that's not going to happen, or that's not going to be very effective. So, yeah, you want to avoid doing that. And that's pretty much it. And in case you can't tell, I had to reshoot this whole scene. I had done it on a GoPro camera, and I forgot to hit record. So screw that. We're back on my phone again. And yeah, hopefully this makes sense. Okay, so that's just sort of a little brief video on some attributes of the revolver, the tried and true trusty revolver, and some trigger press and grip thoughts that I hope you'll consider if you either carry a revolver or you're thinking of carrying a revolver. And I would encourage all of you that are thinking along the lines of a revolver to, when you go to the range, most ranges will let you try weapons out. Just, ask them if they've got a revolver that you can borrow for, a couple, maybe a box of ammunition or something, fire a box through it. Maybe you have to rent it, I don't know. Probably because they've got to clean it, but it's been so long since I've been on a paid range, I'm not sure, but I just, as I recall, just about all of them will let you rent or borrow one of their weapons. So give it a shot, so to speak, and let me know what you think. Hope you guys are doing well, and this is LMS Tactical. I'm out. Can you just, you guys, look what I'm up against. Charlie, I'm trying to make a video. Stop it. Go lay down. You go lay down. You go lay down. Bad boy. He's not gonna let me make this video. He wants all the attention. Look at this guy. He hates the camera. Maybe that'll make him go away. Yeah, see, he don't like that. Because I film him too much. Go lay down. Go lay down, you butthole. Charlie. Oh, he's gonna lay down right here so he can bug me. Really, Charlie? That's the respect you have for your daddy. You stop being a bad boy. You stop being a bad boy. You're evil.